This customer was complaining about a noise after they flushed the toilet. They described it as like a foghorn noise. We're going to be replacing this fill valve. It's not a repairable option for me. Some of these fill valves can be repaired, but in this case, we're just going to go ahead and replace it. First thing that I like to do is shut off the water. You want to make sure that your packing nut is not leaking when you shut off the water. That could be a sign that your valve is failing and you need to shut off the house. If you have a positive shut off, when you flush out the water in the tank, no more water should fill up the toilet. Then I'll take a shop vac or a sponge and remove the excess water from the back of the tank. This will just help keep the mess off the floor when you go to remove the fill valve. You don't have to do this. You could just let the water dump on the floor, but it's a lot easier if you just go ahead and remove it. Even after removing most of the water, it's still a good idea to have some paper towels or a rag underneath here, because once you start loosening these hoses up, you're going to have a little bit of water left in them. It's completely normal. You do want to make sure before you tighten this or before you loosen this nut that you did have a positive shutoff valve and no more water is going into the fill valve. A trickle like this is going to be fine. Now, sometimes you can remove these nuts by hand. This one was particularly difficult and I had to remove it with a pair of pliers. Now, this kit right here is one of the better Fluidmaster fill valves. I like this one because it has an adjustment for the water level in the bowl. It's not necessary to get this. There are tons of different kinds of fill valves. They all operate basically the same. You've got a washer and a nut at the bottom that need to be installed on the fill valve before you can tighten it down. This one has a little red rubber and this white plastic ring here that's going to screw on underneath and in between the toilet tank. Sometimes, depending on which model you'll have to add the rubber washer in. Then you just fit it down through the hole in the toilet. Tighten this up by hand only. You have plastic here and porcelain. You do not need to go crazy with the pliers. Before you tighten it fully, make sure that the fill valve is not touching the arm of the flapper. Sometimes, depending on the orientation, these things can get hung up. And here I am just a little bit tight, and just a little bit more tight than hand tight. And you can add your hose in afterwards. Make sure that you're not cross-threading any of these fittings. So you can back the threads out like in reverse to make sure that they grab on correctly. Now you want to attach your clip for the overflow tube. I ended up dropping it there. It's hard to do with one hand. With the clip in place on the overflow tube, you can add your hose, and this hose supplies water to the bowl. At this point, you're ready to start cracking the water so you can fill up and test the operation and see if you're going to need to adjust the water level, which I am going to need to adjust the water level on this one. You see that green line on the overflow tube? That's where we want the water level to stop. And in this case, it's stopping way too short. There are fine-tune adjustments that you can do on this knob here, but it's not going to be enough to get me about 1.5 inches. So I'm actually going to have to lift the fill valve up about 1 inch, which is going to require me to shut the water off again, because you do not want to do this adjustment with pressure behind the fill valve. You can actually do this adjustment even before you put this in, but it can be done after the fact. If there's a ring at the bottom here, you need to loosen up, and then you can lift the fill valve up and then lock that ring back down. It is extremely important to make sure that that ring locks again. So you want to give the fill valve a tug in the upward direction and make sure that you cannot lift it up again before you turn your water back on. Otherwise, the fill valve can shoot off the top and you'll have a geyser in your bathroom. So right now, I'm going to need to do a little bit of a fine tuning on this because it's shutting off just above that green line. So there's a plus and a minus arrow on this adjustment here. So you can just follow the directions and get the water level exactly where you want it. You want to have it right where it says. That way you get the optimal flush. After you have the optimal flush achieved, you can adjust the water level in the bowl with this valve here. You can leave it straight in line with the hose to put the most water in the bowl, or you can close it off to leave a little bit of water in the bowl. The way you want to do it is you want to have it basically fill up just to the point where the bowl is full and not overflowing into the trap. Takes a little bit of practice, but there is a sweet spot on these things. On this particular toilet, I'll notice right about here where the water level kind of just stops getting higher, and that means the water is just going into the trap and we're wasting it. So I don't need the maximum amount of water going into this bowl. I can actually adjust it down a little bit here, maybe about 1/4 of a turn, and then flush it and test it again, optimizing the water saving features on this particular fill valve. At this point, you're pretty much good to go. You're ready to just let this thing rock, check for leaks. If you have any trouble, there's an installation guide in this thing, and I love the product.